Welcome to this webinar about applying for Awards for All funding. This webinar is designed for all Woodcraft Oak groups, districts and centres, and we will look at the criteria for Awards for All funding in England, Scotland and Wales. The aim of the session is to explore Awards for All grant criteria and the potential funding opportunities it provides to local Woodcraft Oak groups. We'll share best practice in applying to Awards for All, encouraging all groups to seek funding through this route. We'll clarify the information that is needed to apply and hopefully answer any questions that you may have about applying for Awards for All. So, all Woodcraft Oak branches, whether or not you're a group, a district, a centre or a project, are encouraged to seek external funding to support either ongoing running costs or development activities. Woodcraft Oak is a charity and all groups should apply for funding using our charitable registration numbers. And that support is available to groups who are seeking funding by the funding group, which can be contacted at funding@woodcraft.org.uk and on our website at woodcraft.org.uk/local-fundraising. The fundraising group is made up of staff and volunteers who with notice will be able to proofread any applications and give you advice and suggestions on how to strengthen your application. They will also be able to provide you with previous examples of successful applications and generally help you answer any questions that you might have. Now, there are restrictions on applying for funding as a Woodcraft Oak branch. If you are seeking to employ staff or take on a lease, approval is required first from General Council. That any basically long-term contractual commitment made in the name of the charity needs to be approved by the trustees. You can do that very simply by contacting funding@woodcraft.org.uk and explaining what it is that you wish to do, and we will support you in that approach. Now, focusing on Awards for All criteria. Awards for All has been around for probably more than 20 years now, and it is a small grants programme of the National Lottery, and it has three main criteria or three outcomes that it's looking for its projects to do. The first is about bringing people together and building strong relationships in and across communities. It's very broad and is not just about events, but things that help to build cohesion and understanding across communities. They also wish to improve the places and spaces that matter to communities. Now, whether or not that's urban spaces, green spaces, play spaces, community centres, so it can be indoors as well as outdoors, but that it has a broad appeal to all members of the community. The third criteria is to help more people to reach their potential by supporting them as early as possible. So that's about skills and learning development, but also about intervention. At the moment, Awards for All are encouraging applications to focus on coronavirus response. You can still apply for other projects, but priority has been given to those who are helping those most in need as a result of coronavirus. And that's the same across England, Scotland and Wales. Awards for All is a small grants programme and it supports grants from £300 to £10,000. There is no deadline. You can apply online on a rolling basis. It has an application process that you can save and come back to. Assessment is guaranteed within 12 weeks. Your project must start within 6 months of the grant award, and the activity must be complete within 12 months of starting the project. You can reapply annually or immediately if you are unsuccessful. It is unlikely that you will get funding for the same project twice, but if you're continuing to do outreach and development work, then you can continue to submit applications as long as they meet the three criteria of bringing people together, improving spaces, or helping people reach their potential. It is an incredibly flexible programme. The monitoring is incredibly light and the application form is quite short. In this webinar, we'll go through the application form stage by stage. So the first criteria is bringing people together. So this does include events, and it could be a one-off event or activity, or it can be an ongoing weekly group night. You can apply for sustaining your local group or even developing a new one. It can be focused on inclusion activity or outreach activity. So some groups have been successful in applying for funding to do outreach with children with disabilities and SEN, working in partnership with local support groups. Others have been successful in applying for funding to do work with local refugee communities. We've also had groups who are successful in applying for doing new group development, as well as play out and general outreach activities. We did, at the very beginning of the year, have a group who were successful under this criteria of bringing people together and taking them to common ground. Unfortunately, because of the postponement, they were unable to deliver that project within 12 months and have had to return the funds and will have to reapply in 2022. The second criteria is about improving places. So this could be group allotments, could be about doing litter picking, could be about urban gardening projects, tidying up your community and your street, tree planting, or improving safer play spaces. Now, this is probably the criteria that woodcraft folk groups are least likely to apply for, although obviously it is something that would suit our centres very, very well. The third criteria is helping people reach their potential. So you can focus on volunteer recruitment or training opportunities for both young members as well as volunteers, or youth-led social action projects. There has to be a focus on learning and skill development and helping build confidence and self-esteem. We do have research that we have undertaken with both young people and volunteers that can give you data to help support an application if you were to apply under helping people reach their potential. If you want access to this research, simply email funding@woodcraft.org.uk and we can share it with you. You will also find it on our website. Now, to help with this process, I'm going to give an illustration of a project that a group and district may apply for as a coronavirus response. The project that I'm going to describe as we go through the application for is about delivering play-out activities for families as lockdown eases, with the idea that we are reducing social isolation, helping to address anxiety, as well as giving children opportunities to be active and get outdoors, develop friendships, etc., etc. I will also include something about volunteer training to make sure that our volunteers are confident and have the skills and are equipped to manage socially distanced activities and running youth groups. And finally, I'll also include some equipment requests for coronavirus adaptations, such as PPE, which we will all need to have in our first aid kits going forward. So, applying for a grant, it is all done online. The first stage is that you'll need to complete what's called an eligibility checker. It's a very simple tick box exercise where they'll come up with a series of questions and you answer yes or no. The first question asks whether or not you have at least 2 members of your committee who are unrelated. And you should have 2 members on your district group who are unrelated, so the answer should be yes. It will also ask if you're applying for a grant between £300 and £10,000. Again, this grant is a small grant programme and does not give grants below 300 or above 10,000, so the answer is yes. It asks you if your project will be finished in 12 months. Again, it's a small grants programme, short term. The answer is yes. Are you applying for things that you haven't already spent money on? Awards for All is restricted to things in the future. You cannot claim for things that you have already spent, so the answer should be yes. It asks if you have a bank account. Now, it is really important that the bank account is in the name of the applicant. So if you are applying for a group, but you don't have your own bank account, you will need to apply as your local district. If you are a new group and don't have a bank account, you can apply from your region and you should seek advice from info@woodcraft.org.uk about how to set up a bank account and how we can support you to apply for funds whilst you're waiting for that to be activated. It finally also asks, do you produce annual accounts? Again, the answer is yes. These are available on the Woodcraft Folk website at woodcraft.org.uk/accounts. Once you've done that, it will give you the opportunity to tell you about your project. So this section is really simple. It asks for easy questions to start with. The name of your project. It doesn't have to be complicated. Keep it simple. Just, as they say what it does on the tin. It will also ask for your location, and it will ask for a postcode. Now, it may be that your project will happen at multiple locations. You need to select the postcode where the majority of activities will take place, which may be a local park, it may be your group night venue, or it may be a local school. It asks again for a start and end date. You should apply with at least 12 months before, or 12 weeks before you wish to start your project. And if you put a start date that is too soon, it will question whether or not you can be flexible on that date and whether or not your project can be delayed if they take longer in assessment. It will also ask you to give a project description, which is 300 words. This is the longest question in the application and therefore is the most important, trying to make sure that the grants officer understands what the project is trying to achieve and the difference it is trying to make. Now, in your application, you will need to state very clearly that you are a branch of Woodcraft Folk. So here, this is a suggested project description for a project that is about doing play-out activities. So it says ABC Woodcraft, so it might be Leicestershire Woodcraft Folk is a branch of Woodcraft Folk, and with our own bank account and local management committee, which is your district committee. We support 10 groups in Leicester, running weekly activities, camps and outdoor adventures for children and young people aged 5 to 16 in Leicester. So you're clear about who you are. Then you need to say very succinctly what it is that you wish to do. So we wish to facilitate quality play opportunities for children adversely affected by coronavirus. Our activities will comply with government guidance and be fully insured. The events will target those under 12 years, working with our local partner organisations. It is really important that we show the grants officer that we have thought about the detail of our projects. So if you can include a list of partner names, whether or not that's a local school, whether or not that's your local refugee council, whether or not that's your local food bank, it doesn't matter. But if you can be clear about who you're working with and how you will engage children, it is important that you include that detail in your application form. Now, the project description is 300 words. I can't get 300 words on one screen, so let's click to the next bit. So we're saying exactly what it is that we're going to do. We will facilitate 6 open access sessions of cooperative outdoor play at Victoria Park, for example, from October 2020 until July 2021. Activities will include games, craft and den building. Our previous experience would suggest that we will engage 120 children, giving them a fun experience and a chance to connect safely to their peers, reducing social isolation and anxiety. We will publish the events using local media, notice boards, local organisations, and again, listing those partner organisations where you will help to reach out to as many people in your community as possible. I've gone on to add, in preparation for the events, we will train our volunteers in infection control, social distancing and youth mental health. This will ensure that they're fully equipped and confident to meet the needs of children attending. We will also need to purchase essential PPE. We will collect feedback from participants and gather suggestions on how we could further support their needs or engage them in our existing group activities in the area. Now, you don't need to do sustainability or have a legacy from your grant, but from a Woodcraft Folk point of view, if we are doing outreach, ideally we would like to see ongoing engagement either as volunteers or as members of our local groups. So I think it's worth putting in there. Now, on our Woodcraft Folk website, under woodcraft.org.uk/local-fundraising, you will find example awards for all bids and descriptions, including a Word document with this full description for a project ready to apply today. The things that you must make sure you include in your description is what you would like to do. Be as clear and specific as possible. Avoid using any jargon. So we must be really careful not to include something like run an elfin activity. Let's be really clear that we are running an activity for children under 9. We should also include what difference our project will make. So most woodcraft activities are about building friendships, social support networks, family support networks, opportunities to be active, improve their health, physical and mental health, and that the children will have fun, try new experiences, learn new skills. The list goes on. We need to be really clear who will benefit. Be clear by both in terms of geography, in terms of age, in terms of any characteristics about those groups, so that we've really considered who our target audience is. It also asks us to put very clearly how long we expect to run the activity for. So if we're going to do 6 2-hour sessions over 3 months, let's make sure that that information is included. It asks how we're going to make sure people know about it. So you will remember that in the description I said that we would use local press, that we would use our partner organisations and notice boards. It's okay to say that you're going to use social media. If you just say you're going to use social media, it is worth expanding on that to say how you're going to connect with existing social media communities and pages and groups so that you can make sure the word gets out there. And finally, also asks about how you're going to learn from the activity. So it is worth stating that you will do some evaluation and feedback from the participants about shaping future activities. You can then use that evaluation to apply for further projects from Awards for All for the following year. And then lastly, it does also ask if this is something new to you or something that has worked well previously. It is perfectly okay to apply for Awards for All for your ongoing running costs for your group. It is also perfectly fine to try something new and test something. One of the benefits about being part of a movement is that it is highly likely somebody in this movement has tried it before. So if you have an idea or you're tempted to try something new, please contact funding@woodcraft.org.uk and we can put you in touch with people who have tried something similar to see if you can do some learning. And then in your application, you can say, this is new for this area, but lessons from our wider network suggest X, Y, and Z. Hopefully that's clear. As I said, the funding group is available and will proofread any descriptions to make sure that you've completely covered this and it makes sense to others. So once you've done your project description, it also asks you how your project meets their grant criteria. So you'll remember the 3 criteria are either bringing people together, improving places and spaces, or helping people reach the potential. You only need to meet one grant criteria. You are not likely, it does not increase your likelihood of being successful if you meet more than one criteria, but what it does, it makes it much harder to describe how you meet the criteria because you only have 150 words to demonstrate to the grants officer that your project is contributing to the criteria and the outcomes that the funder is looking to fund. So our suggestion around bringing people together would be that our play opportunities will bring people together following a period of social isolation. So that explains why we're doing it now. Our activities will be designed to model safe activities for children and families, which they could self-lead in the future, helping to sustain activity and social interactions. Again, it's not part of the criteria, but I think it's important to say that we are trying to encourage people to continue to be active in the future. And then we can describe that by working with our partner organisations, we will bring together children and families from different communities. Now, stating it on the screen as I've just done there is not enough. You will need to add the details. So you will need to add who your partner organisations are and what different communities you're bringing together, and if there is a particular reason why you're bringing those communities together. So it may be that there are some sections in your local community who don't access the local park, and that what we're trying to do in bringing people together is demonstrate the value of your local park and how families can engage, as well as spanning the world with friendship. So it's worth having a think. So this brief description here does not use all the words, and you have plenty of space to add the detail. The next part of the application form is about community involvement. So you have 200 words this time, and you should demonstrate how you will involve the community in decision making, and how you will have involved the community in identifying the community need for this project activity. So you may wish to include quotes or research that has been undertaken locally. It is also a time to demonstrate how you're going to ensure inclusion and diversity. So one suggestion based on the Play Out project that we're proposing is that our project activities will be overseen by our local management committee, which is our district committees, which is made up of volunteers, parents and young people. They meet every 6 weeks, and if your district meets less frequently, change that, to review progress, oversee finances and plan future activities. As part of our open access activities, we will encourage children to offer feedback using participative evaluation techniques such as chuff charts, which is simply smiley faces, drop and target evaluations. So drop evaluations are a simple way to do drop evaluations is that you can give every child a snack or a treat, and then you ask them to drop their orange peel or their crisp packet or their sweet wrapper in a box with a smiley face on. And depending on depending whether or not they are really happy, they'll put it in the very smiley face. If they've liked it but it could have been better, they'll put it in the less smiley face. If they've hated it, then they'll put it in the sad face. Target evaluations are a little bit like a blackboard, and you ask people just to make a mark close to the bullseye, the more that they've enjoyed it. Very, very simple way to gather learning. And I've also put here that we will support children to make suggestions through the informal discussions we have with them and during circle time. They're not expecting, or Awards for All are not expecting grantees to do any robust evaluation, and therefore just be really clear and honest about how you will gather feedback. Other things that you might wish to do is a very simple parent survey. Did your child enjoy this? Would you like us to do it again? Don't make it too complicated. You may have a discussion with your partner organisations and about how it's gone and what you would like to do again in the future. Include that here. It's also okay to say that you will do a volunteer review, and even if that volunteer review is just tea, cake and a chat at the end, to say this worked really well, this didn't work very well. In a discussion I had with a parent or a child, this was suggested. Let's think about if we can do that in the future. If you want to be more structured, you could look at doing planning for real activities where you invite members of the community for an open day to gather suggestions, but it's not needed, so keep it simple. The next section of the application form is all about the budget. Now, Awards for All supports projects between £300 and £10,000. They will support 100% of the project costs, or they will contribute to a project as long as their contribution is the majority of those costs. Now, I always feel that it is worth providing some match funding, but again, keep it simple, and if you don't have the match funding, apply for 100%. Now, the things that you can include in your budget is equipment, one-off event costs, whether or not that's insurance or licenses or room hire or publicity, include it. Any engagement costs, so whether or not that's transport to get people there, whether or not that's translation, whether or not that's some activity that you need to hire in to attract people to come along, you can include it. You can also include building projects and any small land purchases. Again, if you choose to do this, then you do need to discuss this in advance with General Counsel, as anything that involves a lease needs to be agreed in advance. Again, they're the sort of expenses I would not expect in the typical awards for all application from a Woodcraft Folk group. You should include volunteer expenses. You may wish to include staff costs, but again, that's unlikely for most of our groups and districts. They will not like to contribute to ongoing staff contracts, but if there is a piece of work, or maybe even a freelancer to do a piece of work, you can consider including it in your budget. Do always include training costs for volunteers, even if it's just first aid. It's worth meeting those costs somewhere. You can include any transport costs and any running costs, whether or not that's insurance or room hire, and think about what all the costs are associated to your project. For the example that we've given for doing play out, you may wish to include your insurance, say at £250, very similar to the price that you'd pay your group registration fee. We would recommend including volunteer expenses. If you put £50 per volunteer, that would enable the project to buy every volunteer a Woody hoodie so that they can be branded and easily identified by families taking part, as well as some expenses for travel costs. Our previous experience of playouts is that £40 per session is plenty for refreshments. It's always good to provide drink and fruit and maybe some biscuits or cake to those who are attending. It's a great incentive for encouraging people to stop by and see what's going on. Because our weather is unpredictable, you may wish to include an event shelter. At this time, as we're making coronavirus response, you should include the cost of any PPE. As a reminder, every group should have masks, gloves, face shields and aprons in its first aid kit as a minimum. So if you were to include £150, that would cover all of those costs, even if you didn't need them if you were doing stuff outdoors and socially distanced. It's worth including first aid kit. This is costs that every district and every group needs. You will need to have a first aid kit if you are doing outreach and play out activities. So put it in. I'd also include volunteer training, and that may be £50 a head to do first aid. You may ask Folk Office to come and deliver a session, either in person or online, for which we'd happily charge you £250. You may decide that you want something very specific, and if you want something, say, for example, engaging with refugees, then we can help you get a quote, but I'd put in an estimate of at least £350 for an external trainer. What we have found with previous playouts is if we have a banner, it attracts people to engage. So include the cost of that banner, and then include the cost of any play or bushcraft equipment that you might need, whether or not that's a parachute or whether or not that's arts and craft material. Cost it and use links from your web searches and keep them safe so that you know where you work them out if you are successful and get the opportunity to spend the money. You don't need to apply for the full £10,000, but you do need to make sure that your project is fully costed, because they will not increase the grant amount after giving you a successful answer. And they will expect you to spend it all. So there are some volunteers in the past who found themselves in the situation where they have too much money. So do work it out carefully and seek advice from other projects. And the funding team are more than happy to help you with that. The application form after the budget section goes on to ask about beneficiaries. Now, with awards for all projects, it is possible to say that your project is open to all, or you can tick to say there are specific groups you're targeting. Now, most Woodcraft activities will target children and young people. So you would need to tick specific target groups. You would then need to tick children, of which it will give you an age group, and then also tick young people, of which it will give you another age band. Your project may also be targeting LGBT young people, or it may be targeting refugees, or it may be targeting young carers, depending on who your partners are. Tick all that apply. Other things it will ask in the application form is about your organisation. Now, it's interesting that it leaves this to last. The full legal name of Woodcraft Folk is Woodcraft Folk. It will also ask you to use the name that you use in day-to-day work. Here you can use your local group name as long as it's the same name that appears on the bank account that you want the grant to be paid into. It will ask when your organisation was established. Now, we all know that Woodcraft Folk was founded in 1925, but the current charity was established in January 2013. Now, you can put January 2013, or you can put the date that your local group was established. When it asks for the main registered office, this is Folk Office in Crampton Street in London. The address here is on the screen. And it asks the type of organisation of which we are a registered charity. Our registered charity number is 1148195. If you're in Scotland, it is slightly different, and that was displayed on a screen earlier in the presentation. It also asks when our accounting year ends, and Woodcraft Folk's financial year runs from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. It will then ask for the total income. Now, include the local figures only. So if you are applying as a district, include your local district figures. If you're applying as a local group because you have your own bank account, include the figures for your local group. It will then ask for the senior contact, and by the senior contact they mean the Chair of General Council. Awards for All will check the Charity Commission register for the senior contact associated to our charity registration number. To get those details, email funding@woodcraft.org.uk and we will share with you the contact details for our current chair. Those information details are not here because they also require the individual's name, date of birth, address, contact details, of which I'm not leaving on public record. It will then also ask for the main contact, and this should be the individual who's completing the application form and the person who's most able to answer any questions should the grant officer have them. This may be the district contact, it may be a group contact, it may be just a volunteer who has said that they will take the lead on this application. The other information that you'll need is our charity number, the total income for your local group, contact details of Woodcraft Folk's chair, contact details of the applicant, the main contact, and the bank account details. So the name of your account, the address, the sort code, and the account number. They will also ask for a recent copy of your bank statement or a paying in slip. So you will need to talk to your treasurer to get hold of one to attach to the application. Now, to apply, you simply visit the National Lottery and Community Funds website. Here on the screen is the address for England. Simply change the last word to -Scotland if you're applying in Scotland, or -Wales if you're applying for Wales. The application form is exactly the same. The criteria is exactly the same. There is no increased chance of applying whether or not you apply in March, February, April, May, September, October, November. So apply when you're ready. As long as you've applied 12 weeks before you wish your project to start, it doesn't matter when you apply. It is true to say that during this coronavirus crisis, Awards for All has an increased number of applications. So there is increased competition for funds. And it may be that you wish to delay your project application if your project is not directly related to coronavirus response. That is a judgment that you will need to make. Awards for All are accepting all applications at this time, although they have put the caveat that there is increased competition for funds at this time. But there is no reason why a Woodcraft Folk group shouldn't apply, especially if we're considering how we can adapt and prepare for reopening our groups or starting to do further outreach and inclusion activity to help develop links between our communities. And finally, if you want advice, I strongly encourage you to reach out to funding@woodcraft.org.uk. This is a group of volunteers and staff who will be able to give you advice examples of successful applications, and proofread your application. Now, they will not be able to give you a response within 24 hours, but if you can give them a week, they'll be able to help you as best as they possibly can, and work with you to make your application as strong as it possibly can be. Now, are there any questions from those who are with us tonight? If you do have any questions, you can simply email funding@woodcraft.org.uk and we'll be happy to answer them when the time is right for you. As I said, try not to do this in isolation. Use the guidance on woodcraft.org.uk/local-fundraising and use the funding group to make sure that your idea is as clear and transparent as it possibly can be. And I'd like to wish you the best of luck in all your applications, and I hope that Woodcraft Folk and our activities can benefit from National Community Fund funding in the future. So thank you for listening, and I wish you a very good night.